Yo guys, I want to cover the recent Los Ratones versus Nord just from a draft perspective because I actually think while Los Ratones have been dominating this entire split and have been doing incredibly well in terms of giving a lot of teams a run for their money, I think in this case you can kind of see Nord. You can smell the fear in the way that they drafted here, and I want to break it down real quick just to kind of highlight. Although like LR did a great job in terms of setting themselves up for success in draft, you can kind of see how Nord kind of set themselves up for failure, almost more so. So I want to cover all three games really quick. So starting with this first game, bans are pretty standard. Where I want to pay your attention to are the Rumble bands, the Callista band, as well as the Vibe band, which basically produce a lot of absolutes. The Azir and the Corki bands do make sense from Nord, but this basically sets up a free Ezreal B1 for LR because this is the main poke option remaining in the game and it has the greatest matchup spread. So the normal matchup at this with this pool remaining is going to be something like the Varus, which they set themselves up for. But on red side, it's a little bit awkward because now you're just starting the draft off on a little bit of a back foot already. I would have liked to actually see if they're going to ban Corki, I'm actually down for them to ban Ezreal too, or they can just leave the field open and then kind of bring it to fearless instead and make the matchup more volatile. Maybe they're not down to kind of play that sort of poke game and they're not comfortable with it. I can see that angle, but overall I think with this specific setup you can kind of see it's pretty clear that they did not really gain much of an advantage, right? The point of red side is a strength is to create advantages with as many counter picks as possible, and I think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot with this draft a little bit because actually you can see that LR are getting more arguable favorable conditions for it instead as Nord continue to mismatch. LR, they seem to have some of the let's say prepared picks as well for certain situations. They did see the Skarner pick, they foresaw it and then they end up going for the Ivern for it, and they pair it with the Cho'Gath. So what's cool about this Cho'Gath is it's a little bit raw, but it's quite conditional to this LR team. And that's one of the greatest things about this team is because they're so willing to adapt depending on different sort of draft scenarios, as well as really leaning into their players, right? They're obviously a very whack team, right? You got the Baus, you got to lean into that. And I think it's really good that they have a team that's willing to do so. And you can kind of see it here. So technically on paper, this is not a real Cho'Gath pick. It could be mid or top. And, Nord actually have to think about that, and that makes it a little bit complicated. So Nord basically pick a little bit of a non-answer, let's say, by going for the Leona on 3. It makes sense because they like to give more draft resources to No Way, who has arguably the most spicy pool out of all of Nord. So they go for a top lane on 4. Camille into the potentially what they thought was a Cho'Gath, so they're willing to let's say wager. In terms of the remaining pool, there's not too many other champions that would obviously fare well as both a blind, but also fares well into the Cho'Gath specifically. So it's a little bit hard to kind of really think about what you can go for. I guess you could have gone something like Aatrox or it's not that great, or Jax even, and then go Bork early, but you're still gonna set yourself up for these riskier sort of scenarios. So I understand that they have to swing this and assume it's Cho'Gath top. That's when we get the Volibear Slam, which is hilarious, by the way. Very balanced sort of counter pick, and it gives a lot of resources for LR to kind of cater their draft specifically to what they want, right? And because of the way that Nord gives a lot of priority to mid lane in a role where typically it's picked very early on, especially in the first 3 phases. It creates a lot of awkward situations because that means players like top lane and support, which are typically where you get a lot of draft advantage, typically, it's going to be really hard for them to do so. And you can kind of tell based on the Victor R5 as well, they didn't really get the cash out they were looking for. And this overall gives Los Ratones a lead for the entire draft just based off of this Ezreal, right? And you can kind of see it's not like it's a bad lane per se. It's just that the only cost that LR really incurred in order to gain advantages on both arguably top lane and bot lane is that they have to play Cho'Gath into Victor. But it's a very good diluting lane, to be honest with you. So, you can kind of see, I can smell their fear. I can smell their fear. So, game 2, Nord go for a different route. They see that the Vi is open. They are down. They instantly take that. A lot of teams are down to go for it because it just creates an absolute for a lot of drafts. So, where it gets a little bit spicy for me here is actually they switch the priority. Maybe they caught on. They're like, let's move up mid lane so that we can get the pick we're looking for. So you see Corki Syndra, right? On paper, Nord are like, let's slam Xerath here, right? They see poke FTB, they swing, right? And on paper, this makes so much sense, right? It's super solid. My only issue is that this is more of a B4, B5 comp defining all in, because this basically reveals what your comp wants to do. Xerath is a very, very like sort of game warping type of pick where you once you lock this in, you're basically like cooked. Like this is your comp, right? This is what you're going to be doing. So if you assume that you're going to do that, you're giving Los Ratones like all the time in the world to cater their draft in order to answer, right? So if I'm Los Ratones, you can either see I have a lot of options now. Maybe you took away the forward options because you took the Vi away, you took Panth, and that's totally chill. But the other way is to actually just win FTB and force fights that way, right? And I think that's based on the comp that they have so far and the draft that they end up going for. LR basically going for that, and it seems that Nord had that fear as well, and for some reason they end up actually switching their comp to quite forward around the Xerath. And it's not like this pivot in itself is a bad thing. It's just that when you combine this pivot with the quote unquote all in with the Xerath B2, B3, that's where I get a little bit confused, right? It's quite hard to really morph your draft. I'm a big fan of morphing your draft. It's really good on paper in terms of a forward comp, but you basically tell them that it's a forward comp so early on, and you have a random Xerath that's just going to be there, basically, right? And it can't really follow up on what you want to do. So that's my biggest like sort of disappointment with this draft. And it's not like LR drafted well. They were just given free opportunities to like, oh, they went Kai Sorrel in 4-5. I guess we just go Braum here, guys. I mean, they can match poke, but like I guess like they don't really have the front to back to really match up, so it doesn't really matter. They could be owning up to the identity of like the poke Kaisa as well, but clearly what you're seeing here is like a lot of like scaling, a lot of lanes that are like pretty chill, but not a lot of agency from Nord to really actually it's like they're not giving the draft the respect it needs in order to actually be malleable in that sense. I think that's a mixing X factor here. Game 3 at this point, you're just missing the X factor. You can see that it's a little bit scary. You can smell that Nord, like with these champs gone, they end up going for a Pantheon opener and they go for blue again. So they have a very high priority on this champion, and their perception of this champion is like they think it's like one of the best champs in the game, because I think it was banned in game 2 for sure, and it was let through in game 1, but you kind of see that they are scared of this champ. But by opening a champ like this, it's not like a non-answer champ. It's a very like, it is also comp defining in the sense that you need to set yourselves up in the early game, and there's only so many places it can go, right? It's going to be jungle sup, not really top lane, I would say. So you're going to see that there. It could be because there's not many like supports remaining in the pool, because you ban out Alistair, you're banning out Poppy, Rakan, Leona are gone, so you can see, oh, it's the best thing remaining, right? Technically on paper, but I think support still has that malleability. You can pick other things and you can get creative with new champs. And I think this is more of shooting yourself in the foot than you think it is in terms of the way your comp works. I actually would have liked to see the Ashe opener, because I think in a vacuum this champion can work really well. Maybe they're scared of LR taking Panth themselves, but I don't think Reckless has a single game on that champ. So I think they could have called them on their bluff on that front. Right, so you can see LR just get a lot of chances to they're like, oh, we see Panth, I mean, we could just go Wukong here and go FTB, guys, because like they're not going to really be able to do much. I think Azir is open at this point, but we can just try to go for that. Nord actually end up leaning into No Way's pool once again, and I actually like this on paper. I just think the remaining picks of the draft make it a little bit awkward for them, because now let's say you have the Panth who wants to go really aggressive, and then you're definitely drafting towards that, and then you pair it with the Sedge, which is like, yeah, it's not bad on paper, but then you don't really have too many champs that can synergize with this hedge that well, let's say, right? And again, you're just like giving a lot of chances for LR to really lean into their pools and just not create any advantage, right? So you can see here, like on paper, like they look like they got what they wanted, but what they wanted was like not that potent, right? Like you can see like they're forced into the forward, but then LR just like, well, we can just have a non-answer, and oh, we have jacks, we have a winning lane on the top side no matter what, and our comp's just really well rounded. So all as much as I love the dynamic that Los Ratones establishes with their drafts, I don't think it was necessarily the X factor in terms of defining how they won this series per se. It's going to be more Nord stepping on their toes a little bit, and probably the gameplay as well, like just setting themselves up for that. You can smell like why that was the case. And I believe if you want to look at the LR, I didn't look too much into the LR logic myself, because that would I think that would cause some bias in terms of like how we look at these drafts, but I think it's still pretty cool to be able to see it from that third party perspective and see why they go for these things. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Catch you in the next one. So yeah.